My name is Peter Lyman, and I'm a founder of Nordicity, which is an international arts, media, and cultural strategy consultancy. I'll first do the land recognition. I will do it where I personally am, which is Southwest New Brunswick, on the unceded territory of the Passamaquoddy Nation, who actually straddle the Maine New Brunswick border and are currently in rights claims negotiations, not land claims negotiations, with the federal government. And I feel privileged to share their hereditary land. So about this session, the genesis of the panel was the Canada Council for the Arts call for the applications to the Digital Strategy Fund in, I think it was 2016. At that time, my team at Nordicity was working with the City of Toronto in the cultural division. And as a follow-up to that, we said, hey, why don't we get some Toronto organizations to apply for a new digital strategy fund. And the city played a very good convening role by encouraging the 12 cultural agencies which they gave money to directly, called the major cultural organizations, since being renamed, to make a kind of an alliance and therefore an application to the Canada Council. That was led by Harbourfront, and it was successful. And we called it the Toronto Arts for Tomorrow Initiative, or TATI for short. And that I've always felt was a bit of a lame name, but where consultants are not known for their creativity in wordsmithing titles, at least. Anyway, it was followed by, was done in about a year, and was followed by other projects, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But for the subject, because of the subject being, how the majors collaborate, I've assembled people become friends and who are executives of some of the participating arts organizations in or one or more of these projects. National Ballet, Art Gallery of Ontario, Luminato, as well. We're joined by Toronto's Super Cultural Partnership Manager, Sally Hatt. And because we knew that we should always mix the small, medium, large arts organizations in these projects, we've invited a representative from Tapestry Opera, the ED, Jamie Martino. And before introducing the panelists and their remarks, I'm going to sketch out the majors collaboration story. But I will need to share a screen with you with a bit of a presentation. I just wanted to show the TATI project briefly to just indicate in a kind of a logo salad presentation who we had as members. So Pride, AGO, Canada Opera Company. You can't see everything because it's hidden by the people on the side. But anyway, the important thing to note there is that although it was a club of the MCOs, it was Claire Hopkinson of the Toronto Arts Council who suggested strongly that we have others who are members. So we brought in a couple of others, Canadian Stage and Taffel Music, who are technically the major cultural organizations, but that was a first indication that when, even though it was a question of the majors coming together, it was not going to be exclusive to them. It was going to be an inclusive thing. So that was the first project. The other projects, I think it's important to show how the other projects are related to the first one that we had, the TATI one. And that we call them kind of sons and daughters of TATI. That included the one on your screen you see is the TATI one, which is completed, of course, and DigiArts, which was one that actually was authorized in March 2020. And so we had to, the original purpose was much more kind of a strategic review of all the projects that were going on. But because of COVID just happened, we did a quick pivot to COVID to do something that was now and useful. And so we landed on discoverability, and particularly through enabling enhanced SEO practices among the participating organizations. But there were two that were came out of TADI that were ongoing, that are still ongoing. One is Audience Analytics Collective, which is shared ticketing data warehouse for some 15 to 17 Toronto arts organizations. And it has gone through a journey where it is the trial is about to begin. In fact, we're working with Synapse and Audience Agency on this project, who are going to be doing the technical and the learnings from the interpretation of the information and so on with the participating organizations. It's the one that's actually probably most relevant to the to this conference, because it's all about audience data. So that's exciting. That's going on, and that was another one is digital reach, which Chris Sonneman, who's going to be speaking in a few minutes, from the National Ballet. It's led by the National Ballet, and it has a number of done a number of things in the content area, white papers on the digital rights and streaming production, technical, and doing one on the storage capacity and digital asset management. So that is, but it coming up in the summer and in the fall will be another shared service with a common content distribution portal, which will take content from a dozen or so of the participating organizations, put on a common portal, make it available, and make it easy to register and put content. Content could be any video content really, or any graphic content, and to be publishable on any either managed or services that call up. So those are two that are exciting, ongoing. And then the other one at the bottom is the slide is Digital Outdoors, which is just has just been approved, and it will, so just beginning. Also, it'll be led by Luminato and include probably about another dozen organizations, and that's to both leverage the digital technology that can support safe and seamless arts participation outdoors, as well as find ways to capture audience data from people who are attending events by arts organizations that are outdoors. Now, I just to again kind of put those projects in perspective, I can see, or you can see on the screen, the blue are the ones that are finished, and the greens are the ones that are still going on, or in the case of Digital Outdoors, I just said, is just beginning. What is interesting here is that there's two others that are in white. They're not colored because they were proposals to the to extending digital reach and extending DigiArts, but we're not successful at the Canada Council. Now, but that's not necessarily the end of the story there, because the council has signaled to everyone that it's not stopping support of digital projects. It'll come out in a different form, probably sometime this fall, either in projects or part of the operating funding for arts organizations. So we think in those, the ones that we've started and gone through a trial period, in the case of DigiArts, finished case of Digital Reach, still going on, will have other homes by by this time next year. So anyway, that just goes to show you how the participation has led to a series of interrelated projects, beginning with Tati, which devised a broad transformation framework, and then outlined the kinds of projects that should be carried on. I just bring up one more slide, which is the audience analytics collective participants, just to show in something that's partly hidden here, but that that it has broadened the base of support. So it's not just the majors; it's majors and smaller companies or other companies, both in the performing arts and in the museum gallery category, and also festivals, as you can see, Pride and TIP. So the those are the. It just shows you again how this concept has expanded a bit. So that is that sort of ends. I have another slide, but I won't. It's too much detail, but I won't be there for time. We can bring it back if you want it. But I want to just have that small little introduction of the projects in order to provide a background, a perspective, so that the panelists can speak. My principal question to them, which obviously I've shared in advance, was has collaboration among the majors been advanced by this type of activity? Not only these projects, but other digital strategy projects. And in what ways do they think that this collaborative activity has been useful to their organization and to the Toronto organization? So the first one to call on would be Chris Sonneman, who's the director of all things digital and IT at the National Ballet. And I must say that right from the first days of Tati, Chris has been a real leader in this sort of thing in the arts community, and a solid supporter of the DSF projects. He's also managed to bring the weight of the ballet to support as well at times. So Chris, over to you for 5 minutes. Introductory remarks.
Everyone. Glad to be here. So these projects have been absolutely fantastic in allowing the National Ballet to sort of reach beyond its walls and start to work with other organizations. I mean, for the longest time, or when I arrived, that was not something that I saw happening. And in my role in a shared facility with the Four Seasons Center, I immediately reached out to my counterpart at the COC, actually took him out for lunch, bought him a beer and said, you and I are going to be best friends because you control the IT in your facility and we need to work together. And ever since that day, we've maintained a really collaborative relationship, trying to figure out what the challenges are with tech in our organizations and figuring out how the best way we can work together to solve it. So if there's issues with Wi-Fi, can we get additional access points? How do we collaborate to expand the IT? And so for us, that just sort of led into this larger conversation about, well, this is working great for us. How do we expand that to other organizations and what can we do? So when Tati came along, it was just a natural, oh, that's what we do. Let's sort of work with these other organizations. Let's reach beyond, because it's that old adage, rising tide floats all boats. As major institutions, we feel it's our obligation to take what we know and what we're doing and reach out to other organizations and try to share that knowledge or create a situation where we can all benefit from it and work together. And so, you know, I've met all kinds of individuals from different organizations that I didn't think I'd get the chance to meet. But as we started expanding and working on these different initiatives, it just became obvious that there was a lot of different knowledge that was out there that we could work with and understand what the challenges are, and try to figure out ways in which we could facilitate that sort of cross collaboration and learning on these projects. So for us, the digital strategy projects have been instrumental in allowing us to really sort of work within the community and figure out ways in which we could share that technology to benefit everyone. And so the digital stage, the digital reach, the digital projects that we're doing are all in that spirit of, let's take those key learnings, let's take what we're having and let's share that out to the group. So there's a website, national.ballet.com/digital stage, where we're putting all of our, digital reach, where we're putting all of our content and we're putting our different white papers and documents, trying to make sure that the community has access to the information that we're gathering and sharing it out, and also making myself a resource for other organizations. As an IT person, I realize that I'm it's an interesting position for the National Ballet because we have that sort of knowledge. And so saying, as a larger institution, if you have technical questions, if you have stuff that you're trying to understand, happy to reach out to us, ask those questions, and we're more than happy to share the knowledge that we have, introduce you to different individuals, provide whatever information we can and what we understand to help the smaller organizations that don't have in-house IT, that don't have access to some of the resources that we have. And a lot of that has come from building these relationships within these digital projects. And that's about it. You're muted, Peter.
I think it's because I didn't mute myself. I didn't understand it. How was I muted? So, yeah, so that's great, Chris. And as you've said, you have to go in a few minutes, but thanks for your preliminary remarks. I'll say we want now about you and all that, but I think I've neglected to say, by the way, of course, if anybody wants translation, that's at the bottom, and of course it's all being recorded and so on. So just so you know, you can figure out if you want to ask how you get to the translation. Maybe you can't understand what I've been just saying, but anyway, go ahead. So the next one, this panelist will be Celia Smith, who is the CEO of Luminato. And I met her a year ago, I guess, about this time, as she took over from Anthony Sargent, who was, when he was formerly here for, I guess, 5-year stint with Luminato. And so all through from the beginning of the Digital Strategy Fund, he was an ardent supporter of the collaborative approach, and managed, I think, to transfer that sense of community responsibility, if I'd say, to Celia. But she's become, in the last year, got to know her and has become, well, not only a supporter, but actually led 2 applications to for this round of the County Council, and will be responsible for the digital outdoors, which was a successful one. So with that sort of introduction, Celia, could you go to the questions I posed at the beginning?
Sure. Thanks, Peter. Mute yourself now. Okay, you can do it. Okay. So I want to acknowledge Anthony, who's on the call. Nice to see you, calling in from England, where I think they're ahead of us. So when I joined Luminato a year ago, Anthony was in full swing with Peter and others on this whole Digi universe, and it was a bit of a puzzle to me what the heck they were all talking about. And at the same time, of course, we were in the beginning of the throes of the pandemic. And Luminato, while a major organization, did not have any internal digital data tech savvy staff at the time, although, you know, we have, as of 2 weeks ago, we have a dedicated person to this topic. So that's going to bode very well for our future. So I think I kind of bridge both those majors who have sophisticated data groups and the rest of us who are trying to figure it out. I also should say that I was surprised when the panel was called the majors, because my observation of at least our collaboration was we were actually collaborating with the full community, and that was very interesting to me. We had a steering committee for Digi Arts, which included the COC and the National Ballet, TO Live, AgaCon, also Soul Pepper, also Tapestry Opera, and the city, of course. But then when we opened it up, there were about 23 organizations that participated. So that also included groups like Native Earth or Carnival or Dance Umbrella or Culture Days or Toronto Consort. So quite a wide range of size and scale and experience. It was, as Peter said, we originally thought we would do something. We hit the pandemic. We thought, we can't do long-term thinking right now. Let's do short-term solutions. So we just dove into search engine optimization as a narrow focus and hired a qualified consulting team to work with us and set up a program for all of these organizations where we would all get individual analysis of our current SEO, how we were all doing. Some of us didn't even know what that stood for. Others were very versed in this. Current analysis, we would then go through a whole training program, several webinars with all the staff from all of the organizations. And then at the end of that, come up with implementation and improvement plans for each of them. So it was an umbrella of collaboration between all of these organizations, but the work, I have to say, ended up being fairly individualistic because we all had our own current situations and our own things that needed to be improved. We did this over the course of September through January or so. So it was really high speed in reflection, but I at least was keen to get through this and get something useful out the door to each of us. So there were some lessons learned. First of all, we started out with 23 organizations who expressed interest and started getting into the analysis. It ended up, there were 16 that actually survived the analytical period because it was just too hard for organizations that don't have data strength inside. So although there was interest, they couldn't engage. There was a wide range of capacity of people to even understand what we were talking about and to engage. So training was difficult because everyone was at different stages. I think also the recognition that this is long-term work. This isn't a short fix, although we tried to do kind of an intervention. It's actually long-term, sophisticated work. And it's obvious that collaboration is the way to do this, because if we're all trying to build capacity internally, we're just not strong enough on our own. So how we can build sophistication in the sector, in the community, and share that knowledge and share some of the staff potentially, that seems to be the way to go. In terms of applying to us at Luminato, well, we've spent all year trying to produce a festival in June. And as of yesterday, we made it public that we're shifting to the fall because circumstances have conspired to make it impossible to produce work for June. But as a result, with the gift of time, we certainly have been applying a lot of this. As I say, we have a new staff member who's on the call, Harsh Panchal, to help us in our data analytics and applying that. So we'll do it on projects from now, and we'll definitely do it in October when we bring back the festival. And then the last thing I just wanted to share was, as Peter said, we just got approval just moments ago from the Canada Council that our Digi Outdoors proposal is successful. So this will be a collaboration. Yeah, exactly. Woo! Oh my gosh. So the idea on this one is it's about a 2-year program to analyze what is out there currently in terms of technology to assist those of us who do large scale outdoor audience related events. How do we track who's coming? How can we communicate with them later? How can we do analytics on them, but also how can we develop relationships with those people? And how do we do that in a privacy compliant way? And now, of course, since we're now quite accustomed to social distancing and contact tracing, you kind of think, oh, there might be other applications for this. This is, we'll lead it, but there's a collaboration already that's formed among a number of different festivals and performing arts groups. And I would just put it out there, if anyone is piqued by this and it is of interest, just get in touch, because we're just forming the the initial stages of the rollout now. So happy to collaborate in the early stages. It's got a few phases to it, a review of what's out there already, who's already producing and using some technology, an adaptation of whatever technology is available, and some beta testing over the course of the next 18 months, and then some evaluation. And that's all I'm going to say. End of thought.
Oh, that's great, Celia. Thanks very much for that, and very up to date with your announcement yesterday, and certainly the digital outdoors and your invitation for others to come aboard. That's really terrific. Next, it's you, Jamie, who will unmute yourself, of course, before you speak, because that would be useful. But I kind of called upon you before, Jamie, to speak of this because you're such a great stalwart in this process, yet trying to run a small company. And I know one time you said to me that you've had to learn very fast how to do a lot online, and also how to deal with the unions on union agreements and various things on with the new environment. So very busy time for you. Glad you can come and join us. So please talk about your own experience.
Thanks, Peter. And it's great to be here. I'm the executive director of Tapestry Opera. We're based in Toronto, which is where I'm speaking to you from today. This is the land of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat. And today there are 46,000 Indigenous people from various nations that share this same city with all of us. And I'm grateful to speak to you from that territory. So Tapestry Opera is, we are a contemporary opera company, and we make new work exclusively. Our mandate is to tell untold stories, to bring new voices into an art form that has historically been and continues to be in many ways very exclusive. And our mandate to tell Canadian stories is really quite a broad one. You could tell any kind of story in there, and that's what we try to do. We, like many people, like most of the organizations you'll hear from over this conference, I'm sure, pivoted to digital as the pandemic arose. And as Peter referenced, it was a very steep learning curve, and I am certain that curve continues. I'm under no illusions that we've learned everything that there is to learn about making digital work. But we are a mid-sized organization, which means that I do always have to pay attention to the budget, which is never in line with our ambitions, of course. And so for us, that has often meant partnerships and collaborations and an emphasis on sort of community building. And so there are, for projects like this, Tapestry was involved in a number of them, and many organizations were. And so one of the benefits for me was not just within a project getting to work with different organizations and sharing knowledge, but also sharing knowledge across projects. And so as things developed in audience analytics, it informed what we were talking about in other sessions for other projects. And I found that really useful. There is a lot that theater, because we are live, we tend to think live, and that we are not all able to learn every single thing, and I don't think it's useful for us all to have to learn every single thing. And so having organizations like having Chris from the National Ballet bring his incredibly generous spirit into these conversations was immensely useful. And we at Tapestry started doing live streams very early last year, and I relied pretty heavily on the white paper that Chris had put together around what kind of equipment you might need to do a live stream, which is very basic things, which we wouldn't have had any reason to know. So I recommend checking that out if you have a chance or the interest. Of course, there are immense benefits to be had in sharing costs and sharing information. Not everyone should have to have a data analysis expert on their staff. It's just not reasonable to expect that. And so there is a clear and present benefit to collaborating across organizations within the same sector. I am interested in the ways that we can push that even further, which is to reach outside of our sector and collaborate with others, even as still in the sort of umbrella of entertainment. But what does it look like if we start collaborating with live sports and major productions that are not local, big touring productions or things like that? What does it look like when we start talking to Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment? How do our assumptions about how people are spending their entertainment dollars change when we widen the lens? So I'm looking forward to that kind of conversation continuing. And though those benefits are real and tangible, for me, the greatest benefit is on the philosophical side, which is the assumption that we are all working together towards something. There is a tendency, of course, because capitalism, to consider each other competitors, or a habitual way of believing that we are competing for the same number of entertainment dollars. And I really believe that everyone, the art, the artists, the audiences, the staff, the donors, the funders, everyone is better served when we consider ourselves members of the same community. One of the key elements for me is an equity and justice lens, and the ways that these ideas can be applied to create a more equitable society as a whole. And in order to do that, we must be working together. In that sense, the only way all the boats are going to rise is if the tide rises, and not just as a matter of circumstance because we all happen to be in a room together, but because we are being thoughtful and intentional about that specific thing. So that has been the truest benefit to me, is getting to collaborate with all these incredible people, and then feeling the connection to the sector as a whole, and that we are all pushing forward together to create something a little better, one step at a time.
Jamie, that's terrific, and very articulate, and very modest as well, because I think one of the things that you do also believe in is that smaller, medium-sized organizations can contribute as much as the larger ones in many ways. Yeah, I'll say that for you, but you might not want it to be.
Yes, of course. Thank you. I missed saying that, but one of the benefits, of course, is that smaller organizations have different problems than big organizations. Big organizations struggle with bureaucracy and structure and siloed communications and an inability to move quickly, and small organizations suffer from a lack of structure and a dearth of resources. And both of those things are double-edged swords, and being able to speak across sizes and help each other solve those problems, of course, has been enormously beneficial. Thank you, Peter.
Well, I've also tended to scoop a bit our next panelist, Heidi Reitmeyer, who will speak to that very thing, I think, because her main background has been with big museums, not always big museums, but the last one was the AGO, where you worked up until less than a year ago. And before that, MoCA, which we all know that kind of story of having it finally come together and be birthed, not as a big museum, but and then your previous ones in the US and UK, which you can reference too, but I'll give you the floor.
Okay, thank you, Peter. I actually was going to pick up a little bit about that sort of flattening of the paradigm that we're all playing in, or the field that we're all playing in. I think more than small organizations, larger organizations sometimes have a tendency to not recognize the benefits of the digital, or the digital transformation, or the data, and not often recognize the benefit of collaboration as well. I think as people are building around the digital transformation, larger organizations, and certainly what the AGO, I think, learned from this was a pause and a moment of reflection with an acknowledgement that in a way they had strengths, but other organizations also had strengths, and they the capacity to learn in those partnerships and listen and open up. That the possibility also of interdisciplinarity, which I will just speak from the visual arts sector, is not always a sector that opens itself up to the multi and various disciplines that we're in. I think though, for larger organizations, one of the key moments of awakening maybe that this pandemic has brought upon them as everyone's trying to shift it or everyone's trying to turn is that way of how they could build upon the strategic frameworks they already have with this idea of digital transformation. So it's somehow, the question has always been about how can we be reshaped by digital technology? How can we rethink digital technology? And actually, I think the cultural sector needs to really think about how can they rethink or be transformed by technology? What are the capacities, the processes, the thinking, the personalities that we all need to embrace as we're looking at a massive shift in the work that we do? And organizations don't think about digital competencies across the board inside their infrastructures. The digital is often an add-on, or the digital is like this alternative platform that we all look to. So we replicate what we do on this digital platform, but we don't think about digital competencies. And I think what Taddy demonstrated, certainly at the Art Gallery of Ontario, was how do you rethink digital skills from the ground up? How do we honestly transform the work we do? And Jamie's right, it's like, you know, the silo that exists inside large institutions. You often have people working on different platforms that are incompatible. You have, I mean, the way large institutions, the need for them to really think about digital skills as core digital competencies across every single person working within them. It's almost like, how will that transform our infrastructures to create different ways in which we engage with audiences? And I think the small institutions are actually beginning, they can get their heads around that. They can begin to think about that. They can actually, they're nimble enough and smart enough to reimagine themselves in a way that larger institutions may struggle with. So I think from the AGO's perspective, one of the learnings was actually, how do we open up and how do we listen? And how do we begin to think about ways in which the organization as a whole can transform? So.
Excellent. Thanks, Heidi. You delivered in terms of opening up the kimono of the larger MCOs or larger arts organizations, and you know, they have particular challenges that the smaller ones don't have. We'll now turn to Sally, who will bring the city perspective, but also as a keen observer of how these projects have unfolded, and also I must say as being able to liberate some funds for many of these projects which were important for signaling the city's enthusiasm for their being approved. And I think that's probably, even though it didn't match what doesn't match what the Canada Council will be able to bring to bear, certainly is was key leverage. So what a great job you've done, Sally and Pat, and now you have the floor.
Thanks. So first of all, I will say that the previous program that was called the Major Cultural Organizations has actually been dismantled now. And part of this whole project came out of a report that Nordicity did to evaluate the impact of the grants and how we should be revising and rethinking this. So this was several years before the TADI project started, that they'd begun working with us on some of these large issues. So I just want to point out that at the City of Toronto, a huge, enormous bureaucracy of 30,000, 35,000 employees, culture is embedded within economic development. So certainly sort of the stakeholders that inform part of our world are, of course, other orders of government, but in fact, giant businesses. And no matter what way you look at large cultural organizations, any single one cultural organization that's considered a large organization is tiny compared to a bank, tiny compared to grocery stores across national chains, tiny compared to this, all of whom are being massively impacted by digital transformation, how you bank, how you pay for things, how all these little processes that are part of a user's day-to-day life is fundamentally transformed by the digital technology. And there was a sense that the culture sector, but particularly not-for-profit culture sector, wasn't a part of that conversation, except in some larger institutions. So, we heard of payment systems being instituted by some of the museums that had at least access to some of the new technology, tap pay or all those kinds of things. But within the city of Toronto ourselves, I can tell you that our 10 museums still had cash registers with no electrical connection. They were still push button cash registers. That's how slow we were behind. And so, as a city overall, both within the culture sector and dealing with technology, I could see it clearly from all ends, from the massive transformation at the business level to the day-to-day cash transaction to buy a gift at the Fort York Visitor Center. So part of what this project was intended to do was to try to draw some of the really transformative things happening in society overall and see if there was a way to incentivize the culture sector to try to work together, because we knew that any one organization would never have the resources to be able to set up massive data systems, to start looking at analytics, or to deal with payment options or any of those kinds of things, develop technologies that might work or platforms that might work. Those were the things that we felt there had to be collaboration in order to achieve it all and at scale. And the Canada Council was incentivizing this by providing some serious money to help that happen. So when we sort of launched on this with everybody, nobody really knew what the projects were going to be. Like we didn't know it would be necessarily be search engine optimization, to be audience analytics. That very much came out of these initial sort of sessions that OCAD organized, and they did a fantastic job bringing together a range of smaller organizations and larger organizations to identify both the opportunities and the risks involved. And it was funny because I remember Pat and I, as my director, came out of that session thinking we weren't entirely positive that all the right people were there. That had there been much more digital native, younger, the social media marketers and the lower non-decision makers of the teams at that meeting, they might have seen the opportunity for collaboration way, way, way quicker than some of the other CEOs. And I was partly because they've been growing up doing their university projects and stuff like that on Teams. I mean, I look at my own son; he does everything online on Teams. So that habit of collaboration is sort of inbred more in the next generation of digital natives and not so much in the older generation. But we felt that this transformation had to happen. So that's part of what initiated that. The other part of it really and truly was the fact that as a collective of arts organizations in Toronto, we felt that we weren't getting our fair share necessarily of Canada Council funding. And this was one opportunity to look at that and to drive change at the same time. So that was it was like a double purpose thing to try to make things happen. I think for us overall, we've been incredibly happy by the intense amount of collaboration that has happened, and certainly with the smaller organizations as well as the larger organizations. In fact, leading that, I think we would all agree, I think COVID has driven more digital change than we could have ever imagined at a speed we could have never, ever imagined. That's for us as the city as well as anybody else. But it also actually prepared organizations to collaborate. So one of the first things that happened when COVID happened last year was that in 8 weeks or something, between March and May, a number of arts organizations reskinned all of their arts education programs, got them all together online, collaborated and launched Arts at Home. And it was just a way to reach out to parents who are stuck at home with their kids all day long, to have resources to be able to share with their kids or share with seniors. And it was like phenomenally fast and really collaborative in spirit. And that sort of sense of collaboration overall that I can see continuing extending out into the community, I think is fantastic. I agree with Jamie about Tapestry that absolutely this has to be driven by equity considerations. That has to be way, way more inclusive. And digital technology both can exacerbate those differences between larger and smaller organizations for sure, but it also has opportunities to do things completely differently, which sort of flatten the playing field. So we're still trying to figure out what that is. I'm so excited that Luminato is doing the thing about the free stuff, because as a producer ourselves, we do Nuit Blanche. We have, thousands and thousands of people attend, and we still haven't figured out how to do a better job of capturing who they are and whether they want to sponsor it, those kinds of things. But I think what we're still in the middle of is figuring out how the technology is going to enable participation. And that to me is sort of like, also on the video games, on the gaming front, I can see how many different platforms there are, how many different communities there are online, how many different ways people engage in that. I haven't seen that yet happen, or at least I haven't in the art sector yet. But I think it's coming. I think it's there. I don't know what it'll be or what it'll look like. That's kind of fun and mysterious all at the same time. But I do think there's opportunity. And so I'm excited by it, and I really think overall that the this set of initiatives has done a great deal to drive collaboration overall in the sector overall, which I think is really important.
That's a great endorsement for what a lot of people have been working hard on, Sally. That's really terrific, and to see a city is trying to take advantage of technology in more than arts and a whole bunch of other ways. So I now we only have a few minutes left. We've gone a little bit over time, but I think we've got some great comments from each of the panelists. So if you can, if anybody wants to put any questions in the chat line, go ahead. I don't see any, so either we've stirred up no interest, or people are just beginning to think about it now. But if any one of the panelists wants to make a comment on what anybody else said or add some things, by all means, go. I have other questions to ask, but any one of you guys want to come on? So if not, what I wondered if we might take up a little bit of the question of what kind of Sally was getting to, is, and Heidi is as well, all of you, in what next in terms of institutional responses are there needed? I'm thinking of the projects that they're underway, which have platforms and are actually, churning out data to be to influence influence decisions. If they're done on a collaborative basis, on a trial basis, how do you then transfer that trial into a sustainable operation? And is there a need for a lot more thinking of that, or do you think it's going to happen naturally, and there'll be 3 or 4 organizations in the city which will 2 years from now will be ongoing?
Well, I want to answer that just briefly. So, in terms of a previous collaboration amongst funders, all 3 levels of government help to support the development of CADAC, which is the grant application forms that you all fill out when you're putting in your funding applications. But it was in fact to try to lessen the amount of work and harmonize the information across all those 3 levels of government. My feeling is that for some parts about data that we're actually asking for as funders, for example, for everyone to be able to share, that is a responsibility partly of the funders to be able to pay for some of that, for sure. But where the divide might be is where the specific benefit accrues to the specific organization, that there's some form of a combination of member fees, etc., and then some form of subsidy for whatever these kinds of things might be. And then, of course, we look at examples in England and in UK and in the US, where that subscription model is kind of the way these things are being sustained.
Great.
Peter,
Heidi.
I was just going to quickly say something that both Jamie, well, we all touched on, which is this, I think there is a massive generational divide inside organizations. I think there's a massive divide in terms of knowledge and comfort level. And I think it goes to this point about equity and trust, who owns the knowledge, who owns, you know, capacity to create change. And somehow, I don't know how we do it, but it's almost like providing spaces where those that don't know are comfortable in their not knowing without their expertise. And actually we have an enormous skill set amongst a younger generation of cultural professionals who are really, they're going to be shaping the future. They understand questions around participation and audience engagement. And, you know, like Sally said, my teenagers converse with their friends in a way that I just don't understand. I'm just, you know, I will acknowledge. So it's how do we begin to bridge or facilitate those spaces? Because I think there are conversations that are shut down because of people's fear of change or transformation or fear of not knowing. So how do we create spaces that are open and truly collaborative to identify how we do make real change, significant change, shift our competencies, shift our objectives, our strategies. Anyway, I just wanted to put that out there because I think we all touched on it, but.
Yes, in fact, it goes back to what you were saying, emphasizing the whole educational shift and both in the technology as well as the way we do things, especially in the silos of large organizations. So that's Celia.
I think there's also a revolution in how we create art that has obviously been boosted by this experience we've all been in the last year. But we generally talk about audiences and communication with audiences and dissemination to audiences. But if you actually think about the potential of art practice and whose voices and how those voices get shared and what the prior barriers were to that and how you could eliminate a lot of those barriers with an embracing of technology. So that is something that scares a lot of people. So that is a revolution that we have just taken the baby steps into, I think, as a sector.
Great. Thanks, Celia. There is a question from the audience, from Anna. How do you organize your collaboration together? How do you prioritize your actions? Anyone want to tackle that? Over to Celia.
I'll just say that last summer when we were reshifting what we were doing, we went back to the full group who had responded to our initial request, who would like to be part of this. These 23 organizations put their hands up. We went back to the steering committee and then to the full group to say, we think we want to change the plan. You know, what's your input? How do you feel about this? So, so that was really helpful. We didn't at that stage go back out to canvass a larger group of the hundreds of organizations who could have been involved. We stayed with the group that was already with us. So we probably missed some who might have benefited as a result.
No, that was a good exercise in, okay, what do? We have to think on our feet. I mean, it took several weeks to kind of iron it out, but we managed to kind of come up with priorities. What I'm finding is that those experiments and trials are useful in other parts of the country and other sectors. And the council could do a great service to itself and save a lot of angst and grief and money by making sure there's a very good transfer of knowledge, not just these projects, but all kinds of projects across the country. We're now at the Does anybody in the organization want to say anything? I would like to really thank my friends and colleagues for coming out and participating. I know it takes time out of the day. You got to prepare for it a little bit, and but it's very good for the community, broader community, to see what we've been doing and to continue the results the way we want. So thank you all. I think it's just about all right. Goodbye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.